The history of professional wrestling is home to some of the most iconic structures in the culture of both sports and entertainment. Some of these venues have been torn down. Others still stand to this day and continue to play host to wrestling events, but they all embodied the spirit of the industry. Just a glimpse of the right arena for a longtime fan can take them back in time, to the smell of beer and popcorn, to the arena's grimy, sticky floors as you chart a path toward your seat near ringside. In this video, I will do my level best to count down the greatest venues in the history of professional wrestling. Now, a list like this certainly comes with a level of subjectivity. The parameters I outlined to rank them were the building's historical significance, duration of use, key events, and the matches which have taken place within her friendly confines, as well as the overall impact it's had on the legacy of professional wrestling. You may be able to guess who took the top spot, but be prepared for some surprises along the way. If you enjoy this video, subscribe for more, click that like button, and be sure to let me know your thoughts, for better or worse, down in the comments. Let's get into it. Number 10. The Omni, Atlanta, Georgia. The Omni Coliseum, while usually just referred to as the Omni, was a 16,000-seat indoor arena built as part of the Omni complex. The building opened in 1972 and closed in 1997. It is now the site of the CNN Center and the State Farm Arena, home to the NBA's Atlanta Hawks. But in that 25-year run, it played host to some of wrestling's biggest cards, spanning multiple different promotions. Georgia Championship Wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions, World Championship Wrestling, and even the WWF have all run significant shows at the Omni. It was the home of Starrcade in 1985, 86, 89, and 92. It housed the first ever War Games match during the Great American Bash Tour in 1987, and also was home to the first WCW Slamboree pay-per-view in 1993. Ric Flair would famously shout out the Omni Hotel in his promos, inviting women who had attended the card to head over to the hotel bar for some one-on-one attention. After hosting its second episode of WCW Nitro there on March 3, 1997, the Omni would shortly after close its doors for good. The Omni Hotel is still a staple of Atlanta culture, and one can now be seen standing tall beyond the outfield walls at the Atlanta Braves' Truist Park. Number 9. The Olympic Auditorium, Los Angeles, California. From the 1930s to the 1980s, the Olympic Auditorium was the home of multiple professional wrestling promotions, most notably the Los Angeles-based one owned by promoter Mike LaBelle. Built in the 1920s, the Olympic Auditorium became a prominent location for boxing, wrestling, and roller derby events in the following years to come. In the 1960s and 1970s, the arena experienced a boom for boxing and wrestling with regular Friday night events held at the Olympic. However, in the mid-1980s, the Olympic Auditorium closed its doors due to declining attendance figures for wrestling shows. The professional wrestling scene had shifted to other regions, namely Dallas, Minneapolis, Atlanta, and New York. The arena does get extra credit for the number of legends who wrestled there across multiple generations of the business. Lou Thez, Mil Mascaras, Andre the Giant, Rowdy Roddy Piper all competed in the arena during their careers, among innumerable other stars. Chris Adams, who became a major draw, was one of the last significant wrestlers to appear at the Olympic before the wrestling cards ended in 1982. Today, the Olympic Auditorium is no longer in use for events, but the building has not been demolished and is a reminder of its storied past. Number 8. Kobo Hall, Detroit, Michigan. The city of Detroit originally built the Kobo Hall, sometimes referred to as Kobo Center, and it officially opened on August 15, 1960. It was named in honor of former Detroit Mayor Albert Kobo, who envisioned constructing a convention center but passed away before its completion. The facility, including the attached 12,000-seat Kobo Arena, was a significant investment of $56 million at the time. Kobo Arena was home to the Detroit Pistons from 1961 to 1978 and hosted various sports, concerts, and other events. While the wrestling promotion's presence at Kobo Center ended in the early 80s, the facility is still used today under the name Huntington Place. Kobo Hall witnessed numerous memorable moments in wrestling history during the tenure of big-time wrestling. The Sheik, or as he's often referred to now as the original Sheik, was the promotion's top star and promoter. He engaged in fierce rivalries with other top wrestlers of the era, including Bobo Brazil, Abdullah the Butcher, and Dick the Bruiser. The Sheik is one of the finest heels in all of wrestling history. Ed Farhat, a World War II veteran of Lebanese descent, broke into the business as a clean-cut war hero, then shifted character to a Middle Eastern tyrant with his white wife serving in a managerial role as slave girl. He would draw blood from his opponents using a pencil, or put pins under his fingernails and claw out at people who got too aggressive with him from the crowd. He lived his gimmick, becoming the image of the Sheik whenever people were around him, even at his home. The heat and the money he drew were off the charts. He is now more commonly known as the Uncle of Sabu, and the man who trained the whole effing show, Rob Van Dam. Kobo Hall's crowds were often riotous, engaged, and filled to capacity. For these reasons, it deserves this place on our list. Number 7. Arena Mexico, Mexico City, Mexico. No list could be complete without including the rich and vibrant history of Mexican wrestling and its lucha libre roots. The history of Arena Mexico dates back to the early 1930s when Luderoth began promoting wrestling events at the previously abandoned Arena Modelo. After a decade, Luderoth commissioned the construction of Arena Coliseum, but realized the need for an even larger venue to accommodate the growing popularity of lucha libre. Thus, Arena Mexico was built on the site of Arena Modelo and opened in 1956. It became the main venue for EMLL, now known as CMLL, and it has hosted its anniversary shows there ever since. Arena Mexico remains in use today and continues to be the primary venue for CMLL's lucha libre shows. The arena's iconic architecture and electrifying atmosphere during wrestling events contribute to its reputation as a sacred space for the sport. It continues to serve as a vibrant hub, providing a stage for both emerging and established luchadors to showcase their skills, entertain the passionate Mexican audience, and preserve the traditions of Mexican wrestling. Number 6. The Greensboro Coliseum, Greensboro, North Carolina. North Carolina is a hotbed of wrestling history. It has been a prominent venue for professional wrestling, particularly during the territorial days of Jim Crockett Promotions, JCP, and later when it was bought by Ted Turner and repackaged as World Championship Wrestling, held numerous events at the Greensboro Coliseum from the 1960s to the 1990s. The arena was the site of the first 4 Starrcade events in 1983, 84, 85, and 86. The 1983 Starrcade featured Ric Flair capturing the NWA World Heavyweight title from Harley Race in a steel cage, as well as Roddy Piper defeating Greg Valentine in a dog collar match. The next year saw Ric Flair come out victorious over Dusty Rhodes after a doctor stoppage due to a cut over the Dream's eye, causing an uproar from the capacity crowd. It would serve as a pillar of Jim Crockett Promotions, a home away from home for WCW when they were outside of Atlanta, and even hosted the WWF pay-per-view Unforgiven in 1998 that saw The Undertaker set his brother Kane on fire in an Inferno match in front of an unreal crowd of 21,000 plus. The arena is still in use today, hosting the ACC College Basketball Tournament every spring, as well as concerts and wrestling shows. Number 5. The Sportatorium, Dallas, Texas. The stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. So went the lyrics of June Hershey, and so went the Dallas Sportatorium. The Sportatorium was originally built in 1934 and reconstructed after a fire in 1953. It is an iconic hall in professional wrestling history. The venue, located in downtown Dallas, Texas, was owned by various wrestling promotions throughout its existence. Ed McLemore, who took over in 1940, played a major role in the Sportatorium's legacy. The trajectory of the promotion would be forever changed when McLemore partnered with Fritz von Erich to form the promotion known as World Class Championship Wrestling back in the early 1980s. WCCW, featuring Von Erich's sons as the top stars, was a major destination for territorial figures from all over the United States. After WCCW folded in 1990, the Global Wrestling Federation, GWF, used the Sportatorium as its home base from 1991 through 1994. Unfortunately, the building fell into disrepair in the late 1990s. The aging arena no longer met building code. The death knell came with an office fire on the complex in 2001, and the Sportatorium was finally demolished in the spring of 2003. The Dallas Sportatorium is remembered as a legendary arena, despite its uncomfortable conditions, with no respite from the Texas heat inside the barn-like structure. The Von Erichs feud with the Freebirds may go down as the promotion's hottest act. A local college athlete was so entranced by the action at the Sportatorium, he decided to try his hand at this wrestling thing. He would go on to become the biggest star in the history of the industry, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Number 4, the Rosemont Horizon in Rosemont, Illinois. The Rosemont Horizon, now known as the Allstate Arena since 1999, is located in the Chicago suburb of Rosemont, Illinois. The arena was constructed between 1977 and 1980 for over $19 million and has a capacity of 17,000. The Rosemont Horizon has gained recognition for hosting several significant WWE events, serving as perhaps the WWE's most significant second market outside of New York City. The greater Chicago metro area played host to 1/3 of WrestleMania 2 in 1986. WrestleMania 13 took place there in 1997, with what many fans feel is the greatest wrestling match of all time on the card, the submission match between Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin, featuring a double turn, where Austin would come in as the heel and Hart as the babyface, and both would leave as the opposite. It was a defining moment in both men's careers, and the image of Stone Cold grimacing in the sharpshooter, with blood dripping down his face, refusing to quit, is one of wrestling's most iconic shots. WrestleMania 22 was held there as well, a highly reviewed card that featured an unforgettable hardcore match that saw Edge and Mick Foley crashing through a flaming table, and a main event that saw John Cena defeating Triple H. Playing host to 3 Mania cards is no small feat for any building, but the history doesn't end there. The 2011 Money in the Bank pay-per-view took place in the venue with the white-hot angle of CM Punk and John Cena battling over the WWE title. Punk's contract was legitimately expiring, and he was threatening to leave with the title. It brought back shades of the 1997 Montreal Screwjob, and even featured Vince coming to the ring as though he would have them ring the bell and end the match to prevent Punk leaving with the title, which he did, however he had signed an extension beforehand. The WWE is not the only promotion that utilized the Horizon, as Vern Gagne's AEW held major shows in the building for years, including those headlined with Hulk Hogan before he made the jump to McMahon's company. What made this arena so special was the rabid fans that call Chicago home. Their passion for the Road Warriors at these AWA shows gave rise to what is now known as a Road Warrior pop, used to describe a wrestler who gets an ear-shattering ovation from the crowd as soon as their music hits. Before we hit the top 3, I want to drop my honorable mentions real quick. Now, crafting a list like this is extremely difficult, and there were several arenas I felt really deserved to be here, but difficult choices had to be made. First up is the Chase Park Plaza in St. Louis. Known for its association with the NWA and the legendary Wrestling at the Chase events, promoter Sam Mushnick promoted some of the greatest cards in NWA history here, with legends like Lou Thez, Gorgeous George, and homegrown star Harley Race, as well as a veritable who's who of wrestling history with the likes of Bruiser Brody, Bruno Sammartino, and Ric Flair all having come through the Chase. Few nations on earth have as storied and as proud a wrestling tradition as my friends to the north, Canada. From Montreal to Toronto to Calgary, the Great White North has been home to some of the most beloved venues in the history of wrestling. For that, I would be remiss not to mention the Maple Leaf Gardens. The Gardens were the home of Maple Leaf Wrestling, originally called the Queensbury Athletic Club, for over 50 years. Frank Tunney was the main promoter throughout its history, and for nearly 2 decades from the 1940s on, Whipper Billy Watson was his top draw. Later, he looked just down the road to Detroit to find his headlining act in The Sheik, who was famously featured in main events for nearly a decade. And finally, a venue that took the wrestling world by storm in the 1990s, with a ferocious and vocal crowd at every show, led by a cult of personality promoter in Paul Heyman. The ECW Arena in Philadelphia led to a wrestling revolution that shapes the common era of the sport as we know it today. Sometimes dismissively referred to as a bingo hall, because it was the home of the South Philadelphia Viking Club, its impact is unquestioned. However, its fairly quick rise and fall are what kept it from cracking the top 10 among other venues who have ran for decades. It is now home to the Hardcore Hall of Fame. At number 3, the Tokyo Dome, Tokyo, Japan. The stadium opened to the public on March 17, 1988, one of the largest venues on our list with a capacity of over 42,000 and expandable to over 57,000. Its primary resident is the Yomiuri Giants, a well-known baseball team in Japan. It has hosted Japan's answer to WrestleMania, what is now called Wrestle Kingdom, the annual supercard that takes place on January 4th, and has done so every year in some form since 1992. It now features a second night of action held on the 5th of January, staying in step with WrestleMania in that regard as well. It's adjacent to the much smaller Korakuen Hall, a theater that hosts wrestling events as well, in something called Tokyo Dome City, featuring shopping, restaurants, and even a theme park, creating a popular spot for foreign fans to make a wrestling pilgrimage to. The cards featured often host a mix of Japanese talent and gaijin, or foreign wrestlers. Notable bouts include Shinsuke Nakamura taking on AJ Styles at Wrestle Kingdom 10 in a classic for the IWGP Intercontinental title, Kenny Omega having had matches with Chris Jericho, Okada, in Japan's answer to John Cena, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Antonio Inoki and Brock Lesnar have both headlined massive cards that have taken place in the Dome. The Dome is home to so many Dave Meltzer 5-star matches. The running joke within the industry today is that if a match is 5 stars anywhere else, it would have been 7 stars in the Tokyo Dome. Number 2. MidSouth Coliseum, Memphis, Tennessee. The MidSouth Coliseum, located on the historic MidSouth Fairgrounds, was built in 1964 for $4.7 million. The Coliseum held over 10,000 spectators and became renowned for its diverse range of performances and sports competitions. Various promotions such as the Continental Wrestling Association and later the United States Wrestling Association featured prominently at the Coliseum. The CWA, owned by Jerry Jarrett, and the USWA, jointly owned by Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler, staged thrilling wrestling matches at the arena throughout the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. Every Monday, the arena would host packed houses that led to some of the hottest matches and angles in wrestling history. Jerry Lawler battled Terry Funk in an empty arena match in the Coliseum in 1981, and in 1982, a match between Lawler and American comedy star Andy Kaufman would finish in a DQ when Lawler gave Kaufman 2 pile drivers. Kaufman would be carted away in an ambulance. The angle would get them a segment on Late Night with David Letterman. The feud would gain massive mainstream attention. The crowds were so rabid at these shows it helped to coin the term Memphis Heat to describe the reactions as well as the booking style of the region. In 1987, that heat would get turned all the way up when Austin Idol defeated Jerry Lawler in a cage match that set off a legitimate riot in the building. The MidSouth Coliseum was not limited to wrestling. It hosted many noteworthy concerts and events. There were unforgettable performances by music legends like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Bruce Springsteen, and Elvis Presley. In 2007, it ceased operating as a music venue. However, demolition was prevented due to the efforts of preservation groups like Save the MidSouth Coliseum and the Coliseum Coalition. In 2007, the city of Memphis finally agreed to mothball the arena as a compromise, keeping the location preserved for now. It stands as a monument to a sports and cultural history that is nearly unmatched. Number 1. Madison Square Garden, New York City. The mecca of sports entertainment. Could it really have been anywhere else? Madison Square Garden in Midtown Manhattan has been an iconic venue since it opened all the way back in 1879. It's been dubbed the coolest arena in the United States by Rolling Stone and the venue of the decade by Billboard. It's known commonly as MSG or The Garden. The venue is the de facto home of WWE and its predecessors WWF and the WWWF. Vince McMahon Sr. ran shows at the arena from the 1960s all the way up until 1982 when he sold the promotion to his son, Vince McMahon Jr. Nearly any decade on its existence could earn a spot on our top 10, but combined they leave absolutely no doubt that it's earned the top spot. In its time, the arena has famously played host to Bruno Sammartino's record-setting title reign, the rise of superstar Billy Graham, Andre the Giant, and a murderer's row of wrestling royalty. The list of major wrestling events that have gone down in that building are too many to mention, but here's some that deserve to be highlighted. On March 31st, 1985, it was the site of the first ever WrestleMania. It did over 1 million buys on closed-circuit TV for the clash between Hulk Hogan and Mr. T against Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. WrestleMania 10 would emanate from MSG as well, with Bret Hart walking away as champ after getting revenge on Yokozuna from the previous year. It hosted WrestleMania 20 as well, which is now persona non grata, not so much due to the maligned match between Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, but for its featuring Chris Benoit being crowned champion and a slew of confetti. SummerSlam 1998 went down at the Garden when Stone Cold Steve Austin's title reign came head-to-head with the Dead Man, The Undertaker. The first ever Elimination Chamber match at Survivor Series 2002 that saw the return of the Heartbreak Kid after a 4-year hiatus. The shocking return and victory of John Cena in the 2008 Royal Rumble match. Countless episodes of Raw, SmackDown, Saturday Night's Main Event, and even more house shows. The Garden deserves its due, even as the Barclays Center over in Brooklyn pulls some of the marquee WWE events away in recent times. There is no question, Madison Square Garden is the most important arena in wrestling history.